Good morning. This is Rose Shelton. We are once again live on the I Am Mind series, understanding the power of our mind. And today we are talking about thoughts. What am I thinking, right? Because I am what I think. And so before you can actually change your mind or change your life, hey, good morning, Harold, Curtis, Rashonda, good morning. So I was saying this morning, we are talking about thoughts. And before we can go any further, before you can make any changes in your life, before you can, create a new belief system, the first thing you have to do is become aware of the thoughts you already have, right? So I am what I think. So today I kind of want to cover what I am thinking, understand what I'm thinking, where my thoughts come from. Because if you don't understand what your thought is, or where the thought comes from, then you're not able to really grasp it in order to change it and understand it so that you can feel comfortable enough to let the old thought go and create a new thought. So awareness and acceptance is the first step of changing your life, because it first starts in the mind. So what am I thinking? Where do my thoughts come from? How is it or was it working for either me or whoever I got it from? And then that allows you then to change the thought. Good morning, James. Erica, good morning. Miss Erica. So thoughts create our belief systems. Our belief systems pretty much tell us who we are. But as we've spoken in the past, we are creators. So my thoughts, my belief system is a direct reflection of who I am, right? I and the Father am one. I and my thought am one. Just like I and the Father am one, we are thought. We are God's thought. We are one, a direct reflection of it. And so we, in the likeness and image of our Creator, as creators, whatever we think, we are putting out there. And so how it works is you have a thought, which creates a feeling, which then creates a behavior or a reaction from that thought and feeling. Turn it down. So we have a thought, which creates a feeling, which creates a reaction from that feeling. And thus a manifestation, something materializes, a reaction occurs. So if we look at even how God created, right? So if we look at the blueprint of our Creator, our image maker, that which we are a reflection of, he first thought a thought. Good morning, Brian. Good morning, Lynn. He thought a thought. And then the feeling of that thought created a name and nature that connected to that thought. And then from that name and nature connected with that thought, a reaction, a manifestation materialized. Does that make sense? Are we still on track? I didn't lose anybody, right? So Brian and Kenny, good morning. So because that is how we operate and how we create, we must first understand what it is that we're thinking and creating these feelings that then create this manifestation we call life, or these experiences we have, or these relationships we keep coming into. Like, why does my life, why do the responses, why do the circumstances and the situations keep being what they're being? Well, we can't really change, we just change the behavior. If we just change the reaction, that which materializes, the only thing we're doing is kind of reshaping and forming the aftermath, but we're not changing the root. And it doesn't matter how much weeding you do at the top. If you never get to the root of something, I mean, if you don't just cutting stuff at the top, if you never get to the root of something and dig it up, it doesn't matter. It's just the weed is just gonna grow somewhere else. It's just gonna show up in some other form, in some other matter, materialization. Good morning, guys. Hey, Edward, Orlando, Brian, Kenny. Hey. Thanks for coming. So, what in my own study and in my own understanding, this is how it was shown to me, is that when you can grasp and understand the thought that you have, then you have the power to change any and everything in your life, right? And so then where do the thoughts come from that I have to analyze? Well, it's not the thought about yesterday or the thought about this relationship or the thought about this situation. The thoughts go all the way back to childhood. See, our belief systems are actually established at the youngest and most impressionable time of our life. And that's usually about between 0 and 8 years old. So for most of our lives, we are operating as adults from the consciousness and the belief systems created and conditioned over and over again from an 8-year-old. Now it has the ability to change as we evolve. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It has the ability to evolve, right? But here's the thing, even though scientifically, psychologically, there is evolution that's occurring, the thoughts that you have come from the conditioning of your home, of your parents, of your religion, of your teachers, of your race, of your culture, your pastors, politicians, society, schools, all these limiting boxes. Remember, we talked about all these definitions and all these people and their limitations. All these limiting boxes and limiting definitions, they're all conditioning and defining us. Even though our minds are evolving and can start to rationalize and think, let's just be honest, who's bucking the system? Not many of us are bucking the system. Not many of us are really saying to our parents and our pastors and our teachers and our school and our society, you know what, all this sounds pretty crazy. It doesn't make any sense. So you know what, I'm going to have my own thoughts that's totally different than everybody else's. We might say it to ourselves. We might think it. But a lot of times, in order to feel wanted, to feel at one with other people, we continue to play into the thoughts so that we're not on the outside. It's very few people that are comfortable being the lone wolf, being in the midst of all these people that have this contradictory thing. It doesn't even feel safe. Let's just be honest. And as a child, you're already very confused about a lot of things. You have a lot of fears and a lot of concerns and a lot of doubts about yourself. So to then hold on to these thoughts and then vocalize them, contradictory to all the people you're depending on, doesn't really happen. So actually those thoughts continue to condition you and tell you who you are and tell you what you believe and tell you where you fit in. And so these thoughts create feelings that create a behavior and a building of a persona of who you think you should be, right? And even if it's a thought and a belief system off of fear, off of confusion, off fitting in, then that's who we become, which usually causes a lot of frustration, depression, anger, messed up relationships, fallouts, because we're not really understanding exactly who we are and what we're thinking and why we think it and why we can't change those thoughts. And even we're in relationships with things and people and having experiences that might contradict that thought, we still go right back to it because we've told ourselves and it's been conditioned that the thought is good for us. It's beneficial. So I'm going to give an example, right? So if I'm told that fried food is okay, let's just go cultural, right? Fried chicken and whatever, this is soul food, right? This is soul food. And so therefore, as a part of who I am and being defined as someone that gets involved in soul food type things, then I indulge in this. But is it really soul food? Because it sounds like heart attack food, right? We know that it's heart attack food. We know that it contributes to diabetes and high blood pressure and all these things. But we continue to hold on to the thought that created this feeling of I'm one with myself and my culture and my family. And, you know, we're having a good time when we're eating this, and it's so much socialization, and all these good feelings come from this thought, which creates this behavior, this repetitive behavior. But we never sit down to ask ourselves, is this really true? Is this really beneficial? And then how is it really working for us, right? We're subscribing to a definition, a thought, an idea, but we're not really stopping to see that this thought that creates this great feeling of coming together and love and family actually is causing a reaction, a manifestation of death, destruction, you know, bad health, and all those other things. No questioning's happening. Hey, Quinn. Hey, Pierre, Greg, David. Hey, guys. So, hey, Loxley, Ronnie. So I'm going to use this other experience. So it's a thought exercise. And I want you to kind of take a moment and really think about a thought and see how the thought creates this feeling in you. And then imagine like the behaviors that were created from that. So if you have a thought of like an accident, like the most horrible accident you ever saw, you know, imagine, just take yourself and see like what feelings come when you think about that horrible accident. Or if you have a thought about, you know, when you were rejected, what was that feeling? And then what was the behavior that came from that feeling, right? Because the feeling is what causes us to kind of, you know, or if it's love, there's something about that feeling, the thought of it. And sometimes we're not even in real relationships. We're not even in the throes of anything, but the thought that this could be the one, the thought that this person could really love me creates this feeling. And then we start behaving in the thought, and this person hasn't done half the things we're hoping and wishing and thinking and imagining that they could possibly do, right? So we're like 3-4 months in, 3-4 years in, and we're like, you know what? This person actually has not lived up to one thought, not one idea that I've had. It's been a hope and a dream, and it's been a disappointment along the way, right? Because it was a thought that created this feeling. And you behaved in response to that thought and feeling, even though it wasn't real, even though it wasn't true, even though it really was not benefiting, right? So we have to figure out, what are these thoughts that we have? Where do they come from? And then how do they create this behavior, this response in our lives? And so I remember back, I'm going to tell a story. I remember back when I was a kid, and we were driving home from our, you know, meet with our family. We went to see our family on a regular basis in St. Louis. So we were driving home, and there was an accident on the highway. And the body and everything was gone, but there was this huge, I mean, it looked like oil or like a chemical truck or something been hit, because there was like all this red and weird color on the all over the highway. You know, it took up like a whole lane, and it looked like it skid. It skid, like whatever it was, it skid for a little bit and kind of splattered or whatever on the road. And so the police were the traffic was stopped, and the police were directing everyone around this other lane and merging everything into one lane. And my dad, who's super nosy, has a million questions about everything, which is where my kids get it from. Hey, Trina. Hey, Rudy. Hey, Kevin. So y'all can testify. My dad's super nosy, has a million questions. And so he stops to ask the police what's going on, right? Because he wants to know what is this and what's going on and blah, blah, blah. So I hear the police telling him that there was an accident and the guy was a really, really fat guy, really, really huge, obese guy. And he flew out of the car. And when his body hit the ground, he exploded, he kind of like, it burst him open and he kind of exploded and then skid on the ground, right? So the thought in my head, like I didn't see it, but the thought in my head as a kid is like, I'm seeing a fat guy fly out, fall, splat to the ground. And this is before seatbelts, right? This is why we have seatbelt laws, because people fly out of cars, which is another reason, right? The thought created a feeling, which caused me to put on my seatbelt from that day forward, right? The behavior. Even though it was not my experience, it created a thought and a feeling. But he was saying the guy was really heavy and it kind of exploded, and the fat in his body they were waiting for someone to clean the road, but it was so thick or whatever, it kind of coated the road, and they thought people would slide and it would cause more accidents. So now I don't know if it's true, if he was exaggerating. The facts of that I don't know. But as a kid, is what I'm saying is, to the point of this, is that the thought created a feeling in me, which then created a reaction, a behavior. And that was, I would never not wear a seatbelt, and I would never I would make sure that I would never get fat, obese, because I thought in my head, well, maybe he couldn't fit the seatbelt, or maybe, if I was to be in an accident, maybe I was splattered, and then this police officer would be telling this horrible story about me, right? So it created a reaction, a response in me. But then here's what it also does. We have a thought that creates a feeling, that creates a behavior, a response, a reaction from that feeling. But then we create a new law, a new thought, a law that we decide how we will react, how we will think, and how we will be and believe. So my thought as this kid was, I will never be fat, and I will always wear my seatbelt. That was the new law I wrote for myself. But then, like I said, you can create a law, create thoughts, have thoughts that create these laws and these behaviors. But you also have the opportunity through experience to change those, or to be conditioned for that thought to solidify. Well, for me, seeing family members deal with weight and obesity, and then having some aunts that were like really hard, like, don't eat that, don't get fat, if you do, you'll have, high blood pressure, diabetes, all of those things. And, Black folks can't eat those things. I don't know why they keep eating that. African people, we have a different digestive system, which actually scientifically is true, right? We're lactose intolerant. We're actually not very good people. We don't do well digesting meat, right? It's culturally, historically in our genes, way back for generations and thousands of years, we've been established. Our systems have just not been created that way, right? So, but it solidified the thought. So the law maintained. And if I sat down and questioned, which over my life I did sit down and think and question these thoughts, the question was it beneficial or was it not beneficial? Well, in some aspects, it was beneficial. And so it's a law, it's a thought that I can keep. But if it was the other way, where who cares, you live one life, which is something I also heard, you only live once, live it to the fullest. Well, was that beneficial to me? Was that living it to the fullest, right? So I had to ask that question. Hey, Stark. Hey, Yolanda. Cozy. Dare, Willing. Hey, Vendel. Roy. Hey. So you have to go back and ask yourself the question, what laws have I created that I now live by, that I believe because of the thoughts I had as a child, or in my household, or in, with my parents, or in my religion, in my culture? What is it that I've been told or that I do that create this belief system I have, right? Because the thoughts and the laws you create your I am statements, right? Your I am this. So remember, we're creators in relationship, co-creating with God. So whatever thoughts we bring into the process of creation, they manifest into our lives. But they manifest as a direct reflection of what it is that we think and believe about ourselves. So if we look at God itself, God says, I am that I am. So what does I am that I am mean? It means that I am everything, and yet I am nothing. Whatever you want me to be, I am. Whatever you think I'm not, okay, I won't be. I am not defined. I am undefinable. Well, that's what you are. But what we do is say, I am whatever my parents say or want me to be. I am whatever my religion says or wants me to be. I am whatever the teacher said I could or could not do. I am whatever my race defines. I am whatever my culture says, whatever my pastor does, whatever my politics say, whatever my society can do, whatever my school has. I am those things. No, you're not. No, I'm not. I'm not that small. Just like my God is not that small, I am not that small. But those are thoughts, right? Those are beliefs that we play into every day, and we've been conditioned to believe in as defining who we are. And because of that, our lives are a direct reflection of it. I know sometimes we hear people, there's a couple, like, I see these things on social media, and they say, oh, so-and-so doesn't want to be defined by black, and we should not support so-and-so because they don't believe they're black. Well, some of them do have, some issues, but but the thought of that made me also think, well, why do they say that? Well, if I know that limits me in a box, and then people only see me in that way, but I have this bigger vision of myself that is beyond the limitation of the melanin that I have. And we talked about this last week. We are often defining ourselves anytime we allow ourselves to be put into the race thing, or the ethnic thing, or the cultural thing, or the religious thing. We're allowing ourselves to be defined by dirt, right? Dirt that lacks or has more melanin than another. Right? So then we're defined by the flesh instead of the God being, the spirit of who we are, which is greater. As we said, it is unlimited. It is I am that I am. It is undefinable. And that's a hard thing for people to grasp, that we as human beings are undefinable. Well, we as human beings may not be undefinable, but we as humans that are actually truly spirits, just experiencing ourselves in this human form, we are undefinable, because we are a direct reflection of that which is undefinable. We just keep defining ourselves and then creating belief systems in direct reflection of that definition, and that creates and manifests the life and the experiences we have. And this 8-year-old, or that 15-year-old, or whatever your story is, because sometimes, it's the pain, it's the abuse, it's the sexual trauma, it's the parent abandonment, it's the husband abandoning me. I'm marrying my high school sweetheart, and all the dreams and the thoughts and all that stuff that I based my whole life on walks away. Wherever that trauma is, whatever that thought is, you stop growing, and you create thoughts of how to protect yourself, right? So if I am a child and I'm seeing drama happen in my home, I don't actually, maybe it happens at 5, I never actually even make it to 8 and start creating from 8. What I start doing is creating a thought and a belief system of protection at 5. And I don't go past there, because if I never experience anything other than what I've experienced over and over again from 5, then my belief system at 5 holds true. Does that make sense? Hey, Justin, Spencer's and Baba. Hey. So if at 5, I have a traumatic experience, and I remember, our thoughts come from what we pay attention to. We buy the experience by seeing it. So if something happens to me and I keep playing it over and over in my head, so whether I'm 5, whether I'm 8, or whether I'm 15, the feeling that came with that thought, and remember, trauma is a heavy feeling, and it brings on every emotion, not just the physical thing that's happening, but it's bringing on doubt of who I am. It's bringing on confusion of why me. It's bringing on, where is the protection? And if you grow up in a spiritual home or in a place that's going to church, you question, where is this God everyone's telling me that I have to be good for? Where did it get me? All these questions come creating new thoughts connected to this feeling, this intense feeling, and then you react as your creator, and you create thoughts of who you will be, how you will act, and who you will trust or not trust, including yourself. And then you will get off of your equal footing with God, no longer understanding or seeing yourself in the wholeness and the completion and the greatness of your Godness. And you'll see yourself in the experience of your body, of your human nature. Because, like I said last time, you got 5 senses. You got 1 spiritual sense. 3rd eye, 6th sense, whatever you want to call it. But when those 5 senses overwhelm your thought process, overwhelm your mind, then it drowns out oftentimes that 1 spiritual voice. And then you will create thoughts and a belief system surrounded by the experience, right? And you'll keep acting it out, because it usually at one time or another protected you, got you out of a circumstance or a situation that you were in all the time. It got people to stop. It got people to listen. Something happened that solidified that thought and that experience. And so once it happened, you kept a hold of that. But the question is, it may have been beneficial at 5, at 8, at 15 to create that thought about you, just so you could disconnect from that feeling in the moment, from those circumstances and situations in the moment. But now, 10, 15, 20, 50 years later, does it benefit you, right? We don't ask those questions, right? We just keep allowing that 5-year-old or that 8-year-old or that 15-year-old in its confusion, in its doubt, in its pain, to hold strong at the door of our belief system and say, no, 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 no. Because your mind is like, remember, God does not judge you. Your mind does not judge you. It only accepts the thoughts that you give it. And then it operates in its perfection of bringing forth whatever you say. And if you have told it that this is what keeps us safe, this is what makes me feel loved, that this is what gets me to the next day, it will hold true because it loves you that much. It will do whatever you say that makes you feel good about yourself. This is why addiction is hard. Because when you are an addict, you bring something into your body. And I mean, you don't have to be an addict. I mean, you could just do weed or wine or bourbon, whatever. You bring that into your body. Now remember, you've got these thoughts. All this stuff is happening. right? And it's overwhelming and you don't know what to do. But that one hit, that one drink, and then it overwhelms the thoughts, the mind, the feeling. And then when it overwhelms the feeling, you give yourself a direct statement. You give yourself a direct law saying, this gives me peace. This gives me joy that I can't find out there. This gives me the comfort and the compassion, or gives me the courage that I don't have without it. Smoking, the same thing. And you know what your mind does? It says, okay, write that law down. We know that the body's responding this way, but my creator, me, God of my universe, me, has said this is good, right? You're the creator. You name whatever you want good. And you say, oh, this is good. Every time I take that hit, oh, it feels so much better. Every time I shoot up, I feel like I could finally make it another day. Every time, and it's solidified. Just like years and years of being in that household. Now, every time, every day, every week you do that, you're creating laws. And it's creating a thought, it's creating a feeling that writes that law down. And that 5, 8, 15, 25-year-old standing at the door, your belief system says, this is the law that we live by. And any and every time we feel uncomfortable about this, we'll do this. And even though the body doesn't want it, even though we say and think we don't want it, we've already created the law that this is good. So even addiction is an overriding of belief system. And that's really hard, because not only is there an overriding of the belief system, that belief system overrides the response of your body, and you don't even respond to what your body is truly telling you. And so there's a change even in the molecular structure of your body, right? We're doing this all the time, every day, creating laws from thoughts and feelings. So what are we thinking? Why are we doing this? Where do they come from? Because I am not separate from my thoughts. I and the Father am one, right? I, a creator in the likeness and image of my God, I am one with my creation as well. I and my thought is one. So what am I thinking? What nature have I given myself? God thought a thing. There was a feeling that brought forth the name and nature of that manifestation. A thought creates the feeling, and that feeling gives name and nature, a behavior, reaction, response, which then creates a law. God thought, he felt, and manifested as that thing materialized in his mind. He gave it name and nature and called it good. This is who we are. This is what we are doing every day. So what are we thinking, and where are these thoughts coming from? And are they beneficial? So where are they coming from? A lot of times where they're coming from, and not only your childhood, but you can have thoughts from generations of people that you've not even met. And let me show you this. And so I'm looking at my screen, and it looks like most people are of minority descent. So you'll understand when I say this. So people of African descent, Jewish descent, well, actually, Native American as well. And you can be operating now today on thoughts and behaviors of people who have been enslaved, who have experienced trauma like Holocaust, those that even right now in Eastern Europe, from years of war, you respond and you react, and you don't know why. You don't know why you're supposed to hate a person. You don't know why you're supposed to be scared of a person. You don't know why you're not supposed to trust certain people. You don't know why you're supposed to do and feel certain ways, but you do. And it's been conditioned for you to do it, right? And it's not benefiting you, but because it was handed down to you from trusting loved ones and trusting hands, and it's been culturally enforced, you still do it. So here's an example. And I know someone with my grandfather, and my grandfather was an amazing guy to me. Like, me and my cousins, we thought my grandfather was everything. Like, we knew, you go to we call him Big Papa. It was short for Big Papa. We go to Big Papa's house, and Big Papa had everything. Like, if he knew you were coming, he'd go and buy the best food from the best places, and he would pay like the little ladies in the neighborhood to cook the food, and he would build us bikes and, tricycles, and have everything pretty much laid out. Whatever we wanted, he would make sure it was done. And if he couldn't do it, he would get one of our uncles or aunts or somebody else to do this for us. So I was, it was like, heaven. Whatever I wanted, he would do it. But my mom, when I would listen to their stories, they had a different experience of him. And when I got to know the backstory of his life, then I realized, because of the way he grew up, my grandfather was about as black as his shirt, right? On my mom's side, he was about as black as his shirt, tall, over 6 feet, and just muscular. I mean, even when he was in his 90s, he had muscles like The Rock. Like, it looked like he went in and pumped every day, but this was all natural. And so for white people, he was very intimidating, right? Because he was everything they had been told to be scared of, even though he was the nicest and sweetest and most gentle person that I knew. But growing up, when I listened to my mom and her sisters speak, he was a very hard guy. He had a lot of sad days when he would come home, and it was just a really hard life. But when I thought about how he grew up, and his mom was, she raised horses, and she was this one black woman who raised horses, who had kids. Her husband died, but she kept the business going. But at that time, black folks wasn't free. He's talking about my great grandmother. A lot of people weren't free. So you got this black woman who's not only free, but she's got this business and she's got her own land. And that was a hard life. And I remember them telling me stories, like my grandfather got so mad one day just of stuff when he was a kid, like he was like 14, 15 years old. He got so mad and so angry that he punched a horse and killed it. Because it was just so much trauma dealing and living in that time, dealing and still having to be nice and kind to white people that were literally treating you like the bottom of a dog shoe, not even a human shoe, right? And so he had thoughts and feelings, and his behavior reflected. And this, I sat down and thought about this, when I was really a teenager, because I didn't understand what was the difference. And I also didn't understand, and I paid attention that actually some of the things that he and my grandmother had instilled in my mom and my aunts, I kind of saw them still kind of doing certain things and, certain ways that they thought and talked. But I went back to see why. Why did they think that? And why should I still think or feel a certain way? Or why did he change how he was with them versus with us, the grandkids? And he had thoughts and feelings of all the time being oppressed and being depressed and being suppressed no matter what he did. I mean, to where like the insurance guy, it was a white guy, he felt it okay to just come in their house whenever he wanted, just do whatever there was no boundaries, no level of respect whatsoever, even from as a child all the way up to an adult, married, own his own home, and still just disrespected, right? And so a lot of times he was hard on his kids and raised them to be a certain way because he himself felt it was the way to keep himself safe. And so my parents didn't really understand why he would say certain things or want them to do and be certain ways. And then eventually, of course, they changed because they had different experiences. And he eventually changed too because it was a different time in life. But his intention was to keep them safe, to keep them alive one more day, right? Because it wasn't about your self-respect. It was about staying alive. So if here I am 3 generations later operating off the same idea of I just need to stay safe, I just need to do whatever they say so that I'm cool, but that doesn't really benefit me, right? That just keeps me out of the loop, right? If I don't ask for what I want, if I don't speak up, if I don't say, hey, that's not right, that, this is not just, then it keeps me actually out of the loop and I never get what I want. So that thought, though it had great intention at that time, it doesn't help me now, right? The same thing for slaves. They usually pass down the thoughts of staying alive. Say whatever you need to so that you don't get killed. Say whatever you need to just to make it through the day. And we often do that now, right? We call that code switching, right? We just need to do whatever we need to do. We just need to say whatever we need to say. And, you see that in almost every culture that has ever been oppressed, that has ever gone through war, that has ever been colonized, that I just need to make it through that day. But now it's years later, it doesn't work. So we got to create new thoughts, new laws for ourselves on how we will be, because that from way back when, even though we're still doing the same thing with the soul food, even though the soul food on Sundays been doing that forever. Because why? Because that was the only time slaves were able to eat. That was the only day that they were able to be free and to be happy, on Sunday after church. That was the only day they got any respect, because they respected God and they went to the same churches and followed the same religion their master told them was good for them. So then why are we doing it now, right? Nobody asked the question. Why are we eating all the scraps, all the rooter to the tutor, right? Because that's what slaves could eat. Why do we now eat slave food when we know it kills us, right? Question. Why are we not asking this question? Why are we doing the same things? So this week, the thing is to really ask yourself, what am I thinking? And where do my thoughts come from? And then, is it benefiting me? Or is it not benefiting me? Right? I'll tell you one last story. There was a lady, I heard this story in a church one time. There was a lady who was making ham, and she cut off the ends of the ham. And her daughter asked her, "Ma, why do you cut the ends of the ham off?" She said, "Oh, actually, I don't know. My mom did it." So she calls her mom, and her mom says, "You know what? I don't know. Let me ask your grandmother." So she calls her grandmother and says, "Ma, why did you cut off the ends of the ham?" She said, "Because back then we never had pans big enough to hold the ham." So for generations, 3 generations, they've been cutting off the ends of the ham because they thought that's what you're supposed to do, right? That's part of the process. That's what makes it good. That's, that's what you do. But nobody ever asked the question, why? And it was because the pan was not big enough It had nothing to do with the recipe. It had nothing to do with the process. But everyone had created these thoughts and ideas. But when this little girl, 3 generations later, finally asks, and they go to the root, and it's like, oh, no, you're wasting ham, right? You're cutting off the ends for no reason. So you got to ask the questions. Is this benefiting me? Why am I doing this? Why do I think this way? Why did my parents say what they said? Why did my teacher say what she said? My teacher told me that I could not be anything other than a teacher and a nurse because I was Black and I was female. She was my first grade teacher, a white woman. Why did she tell me that? Right? My dad always says, I always ask 3 questions when someone says something to you. Why are they telling me this? What relevance does it have to me? And what relevance does this have for them? Who's benefiting? Well, her telling me that didn't actually benefit me. It benefited her and her narrative she had of me and little girls of color. Right? So I can't even accept her thought, her conversation. But if I didn't have parents and I didn't have a grandmother that flew off, the handle when this conversation was had, that this was told to me, then I could have kept that thought if I never said anything to anybody. And all year long, because my parents took me out of her classroom, put me in another classroom, but all year long, she could have conditioned me and told me all kinds of stuff about what I couldn't be and what I could be just based off of my color and my gender. And apparently, she was a teacher. Maybe that's what all she thought she could be as well as a woman. Because I told her I wanted to be an astronaut. She said, not only can Black people not do that, but definitely not a woman, right? And then by the time I got to 5th grade, we had women and even a teacher, even though it ended in tragedy, a woman, female teacher, going to the moon, right, as an astronaut. So we need to ask ourselves, because all these thoughts have defined us. They cause anger, they cause frustration, they cause doubt, they cause confusion. So what are the thoughts that we hold? So that then we can change the feeling and then create a new thought and a new law. And so next week, I'm going to tell you what we do once you have analyzed and grasped and held this thought to figure out where it comes from. And you got to know where it comes from, because that's the only way you can pull it from the root. It's the only way you can pull it from its root. And you can look at it and say, oh, you're not actually beneficial. Oh, you're actually an illusion. Oh, you're actually my dad's disappointment. Oh, you're actually my mom's failure. Oh, you're actually my teacher's limitation. You have no truth, no root actually in me. And I've been living with you and thinking about you and dealing with you, and you are not true, right? That's the only way you can do that. And then next week, we'll talk about how then you recreate a new law to override the other, to create what it is that you truly desire, and then remove all the limitations you have. All right? We're out of time. I love you guys. Thank you so much again for coming. I hope this made sense to you. If you have any questions, please email me. And even while we're in class, if you want, you can put the questions up. I'll stop and answer them. So I so appreciate you. Have a great and wonderful week and weekend.